SaveWithConrad.com.
My name is Catherine West from Visalia, California. And for many years, my husband has listened to the podcasts. And so every time I am stressed about anything, he has said, well, we need to call Save with Conrad. We ended up in a situation where we thought this would be helpful for us. So we were struggling with some credit card debt that we had. We knew that we had some equity in our house that we could possibly access to get some cash out and refinance, consolidate some of those things. And so we were able to do that with this latest refinance that we did. It saves us so much on interest and really helps us out financially. Plus, we have a little left over to be able to do a few things around the house that we wanted to. And the money that we were paying into those things, we can hopefully start saving now. In that alone, we'll save $1,400 a month. And it didn't change our house payment, maybe even like $50 less. I feel like we're far away in terms of like the United States, but I don't feel that far away from you guys. I always feel like you're a phone call away, you're an email away, and always like available to me. Diane Raver is who we worked with. And every time I needed her, I was able to reach out and contact her. And she was always getting right back to me. I felt heard. I called with real concerns. And I really just needed some help and to figure out how to make this work. I never felt like I was getting this because you just wanted business. Like I felt like you genuinely care about what I need and you heard what I needed. And then you found a way to make that happen. And so I recommend you guys wholeheartedly. I feel like you'll be honest and helpful. And feeling heard is just what every person wants to have done when it's in a situation like this. My name is Catherine West, and I saved over $1,400 a month with SaveWithConrad.com.
NMLS number 2129, Equal Housing Lender. SaveWithConrad.com. Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to My World. And of course, we couldn't do it without the Hall of Famer, the greatest professional wrestler of all time, your friend and mine, Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Jeff, how are you, man?
Oh, Connie, I am, well, I'm doing a lot better since the last time I actually saw you, which was only a few days ago. You can probably still hear it in my voice a little bit. Very rarely does the Last Outlaw go down with a bug, but I've had one. But I am on the backside of it, very thankful for that. Still a little raspy, but on the mend. Looking forward to a huge week. Conrad, I was happy to see your face and looking forward to hearing your comments on just kind of where things are headed in 2025. I knew my announcement would ruffle some feathers. A lot going on in the wrestling world. We had our Max is up and running. Netflix is up and running. The wrestling business could continue to grow and full of surprises around every corner. But our good old wrestling business, Connie, is something else, just to say the least.
Man, I'm having a lot of fun with it. I was fortunate enough to be able to ride up to see AEW Dynamite in Clarksville, Tennessee, a beautiful arena I didn't even know existed. I want to thank AEW and Tony Khan and the whole crew for all their hospitality. Super fun, and greatly appreciate the opportunity to see you do your thing live and in person. I was tickled to death to see you standing in the ring with MJF, and man, when you let those words roll off your tongue where you called MJF what a lot of people online have been saying, you know, oh, he was so hot and he was the man, but that was then and this is now. And you reminded that audience in just a short drive from Nashville, Tennessee, that around these parts, we got a name for a fellow like you. One hit wonder. Man, if that's not a t-shirt at AEWshop.com, what are we doing? Jeff Jarrett, you put Max in his place. He's a turd human being. Not the salt of the earth, but one of the worst. And I was glad to see you put him in his place, too.
You know what? Just as we're sitting here chuckling about this, because I was going to almost cut you off, because when I started going to Clarksville, Tennessee, literally in the 80s, and I told this story, my first couple of trips up there were hanging we called them window cards, posters, big posters in the card. And now to see that town, it was kind of a community that supported Fort Campbell Army Base, which is a massive Army base, but it is well beyond that now. And about an hour out of Nashville. But that arena, I was describing it to a guy in the gym this morning. I said, think of any major arena in the country. In these parts, it's Bridgestone. You could go on and on and on. Whatever arena, Barclays, whatever it is, just shrink it down to about, I don't know, 5,000 to 7,000, and there you have it. All the amenities, the suites. Anyway, very, very cool building. I'm happy to see Clarksville. It was a great building to perform in. The acoustics, people were on top of people, had a fantastic crowd out, and they were rowdy. And Connie, they did, I'll say they did kind of bite unexpectedly. I just was, it rolled off my tongue looking at the old one-hit wonder, but I can see our man Dave Silva making a graphic now, maybe the title of the episode, who is a true one-hit wonder. And if we could make, because MJF, would you say he looks very similar to Billy Ray Cyrus, just without the mullet? He's got, there is a very crossover appeal between Billy Ray. MJF may be kind of the Long Island version of Billy Ray Cyrus, would you say?
Well, I can't wait till you break his achy breaky heart. No more championship reigns for him, but 13 is on deck for Double J, and you should do what I'm doing. Ride on up to Knoxville next week and go see Jeff live do his thing. Tickets are on sale now at AEWTIX.com. And the week after that, they're coming to Huntsville. You know I'm going to be there. Once again, AEWTIX.com is the place to get it. I want to remind everybody that we've got Top Guy Weekend right around the corner. Actually, I guess we're calling it Top Guy Rumble. And it's going to take place at the one and only Von Braun Civic Center. AEW is going to be in town for Dynamite and Collision on Wednesday night. And then on Thursday night, our Top Guy festivities will be underway. We're going to be hanging out at my favorite watering hole, The Boot. Then we've got a little private comedy show with my best friend, Cassio Kidd, and a handful of other comedians that you may recognize. But that's just the appetizer. On Friday, our top guys and gals will step inside the ring and learn firsthand what it's like to be a pro wrestler with AEW's own, the legend himself, Jerry Lynn. Jerry's going to teach you how to run the ropes, take some bumps, cut some promos, everything your favorite stars do. Jeff, how cool is this fantasy camp idea that we're doing in Huntsville at the end of the month?
It is. It reminds me of the MasterCard commercial. You can put a price tag on just about anything, but if you are, you know, any level of fandom, but to go to a wrestling fantasy camp with none other than my man Jerry Lynn, and you know, me and Jerry go back actually to the late 80s. He drove down from Minnesota and worked the Tennessee territory. So me and Jerry go way back, but he's a guy that first TNA match, who do you put in there? The Glue. And you just kind of look through Jerry's career, both in front and behind the camera. He's second to none, top notch. I still want to know how you got him to do this, because he's got his hands full with that Top Guy crew. But no, it's going to be a blast. And you will come away. We're going to come away with, man, I'm dating myself here, but some Kodak moments, because this is, it's a fantasy land that you guys are going to create. So I'm going to be a part of it. I won't be a part of Jerry's session, but I'm looking forward to a panel show or some festivity that you guys have lined up. But again, can't put a price on. You truly can't. If you're wrestling, want your fix, this is a fix like none other.
It's a super fun time, and it's exclusive for ad-free shows, Top Guy members. Believe it or not, it's not too late to join us. You can still be there for Top Guy Rumble. Just become an annual Top Guy member now at adfreeshows.com. That's adfreeshows.com. That's where you'll find more than 100,000 hours of bonus content from a who's who of professional wrestling legends and, of course, all of my podcast co-hosts. Check it out. Join us in Huntsville for Fantasy Camp, Top Guy Rumble. It's happening before you know it at adfreeshows.com. Hey, it kind of snuck up on us, man, but WWE made their debut on Netflix last week. You and I put one in the can in advance of that program. What a show it was.
Right.
And we also saw AEW on Max. I mean, it's been a crazy year so far. I love the resolution on Max. It feels like it comes through even a little more HD than what I get through YouTube TV. So I'm loving that. But I did want to ask you if you had a chance to catch WWE's debut on Netflix and what you thought.
So being the junkie that I am, I did the deep dive with a few family members and then by myself, just trying to oh, how do I say this, Conrad? I tried to dive into it and get my mind wrapped around from the viewer, from the fan perspective. And Conrad, we've just entered a new age. To me, in so many ways. Netflix started off to me. Look, it was episode 1, so you can kind of expect quite a bit of talking, and you can get into the subjectivity of creative and all that. But just the fact that that program and Max as well, Dynamite and Collision, the days of, I guess you could say, not on demand and just seen in the United States, and our international folks have to wait on sometimes, and sometimes not hours, but days. Those days are going away. And that was, to me, as a third generation guy, if you will. And so, dude, it's just kind of amazing. And look, I'm not the biggest technology buff, but the feed and the 4K, and you hear the talk of the 8K and the resolution and how cool it is. I just think the fact that the program is, we've been around the streaming world really since major step with WWE Network came online. And so that was 10 years ago. Now look where we're at, that the flagship shows of both the major promotions are in the streaming world. Connie, are the days of the ratings barometer gone?
It's over.
Do you think you think it's pretty?
Well, I mean, the flagship #1 biggest wrestling show in history is, we're not going to get ratings anymore. So yeah, I think it's a done deal.
Yeah, that is
it's a paradigm shift.
I hate to use that term because sometimes I don't think I use it accurately, but to steal a line of Mr. Nick Khan, ratings, revenue, and relevance. Does he use that line anymore? Because I know, when we're going to get into some really cool stuff here on our episode today, and a couple of matches on this pay-per-view. We're going back, 25 years ago or 20 years ago, that just jumped off the page, but going to the 3 R's, and, where the ratings, in a lot of ways, professional wrestling since, Raw came on the air. Well, even before that, Saturday night, TBS 605, and then the Saturday morning shows that my father literally had the ability to walk into WMC studios and say, look, we produce these ratings, and they came out quarterly. But based on the ratings, he commanded to be paid for his TV show, which, in the late 70s, early 80s was unheard of. And so, but that all hinged on ratings. Now, as you just said, and I've just kind of continue over the last, week or two, does something replace that? It's good. I'd love to get in a room with you and some others and just kind of start talking about these topics. Like, what is the new barometer? Is there a barometer? Is there a digital stream, or is it completely irrelevant? Do we now just focus on revenue and relevance? I don't know.
We're going to find out. It's going to be interesting. I will say one thing that stuck out to me is, well, it was the biggest talking point maybe at the end of the night from the first ever Raw on Netflix, besides the Hulk Hogan booing. Let's talk about that first. What do you make of Hulk Hogan's reaction?
Well, last week, Conrad, I did, you familiar with Bobby Bones? I'm just,
yeah.
Anyway, I was doing my rounds of media, and I was in the iHeart Studios, and I've done Bobby before. He's a buddy, and he, through our PR guy, Mr. Adam Hopkins. Anyway, long story short is, ended up doing over about an hour with him, and he brought that up. Now, Bobby is a grew up in the 80s. You know, he was right kind of a sweet spot in Arkansas. Conrad, he got Dallas, he got Watts, and he got some Memphis. So he kind of was in an area that it's, you know, it's a unique viewing set of circumstances, but he knows his wrestling. And, you know, he brought up the Hogan situation. And, you know, hearing his perspective was, hey, this was not a politically motivated booing. You know, he goes, I don't care if it's in California. You know, he went on to talk about Undertaker was out there, and Undertaker is you know, supported the same folks. Trump supported Trump, same thing Hogan did. I don't know, Conrad, in that, because there is just so many different opinions about the set of circumstances, but the old adage taught to be my old man is that's 1 week. Now, if they parade him out in a couple of other weeks, how do they pivot? Where do they go? The McAfee kind of follow up the next day or two was interesting. It is super interesting in that, look, you can say what you want, and I've gone into detail on this podcast what I believe Hogan's strong suits and weak suits. Him running a wrestling company is not his forte. I think he's the best in the industry taking care of himself. No, I don't think there's really a close second. When you look from early 80s until now, time and time again. And now he's got ownership at a beer brand that the not just the WWE, Endeavor has a part in. He ain't going away. How do they pivot? How do they, you know, move through all this? But I just thought it was really interesting that the resounding, I call it just massive heat. I don't know if that's an accurate term, but it's going to be interesting, like wrestling always is. What is the next step with Hogan and WWE? How are they going to move through this? Are they going to act like it didn't happen? Are they going to pivot and maybe go down a heel route? Or are they just going to keep selling the beer and try to figure out what coat of paint they're going to go on with the branding? But, man, you got to love wrestling. The wrestling fan. They will tell you what, I've said it over and over. They'll tell you what they like, but most importantly, they'll tell you what they don't like. That's kind of the beauty of it.
Something I didn't like on the program is that they just showed Cody sitting in the crowd. And I asked myself when I watched it, would they have done that with Hogan in 88? No. Would they have done that with Austin in 98? No. Would they have done that with Cena in 08? No. And I understand that show wasn't really for us hardcore week in, week out wrestling consumers. It's not for the internet wrestling community. It's for the masses. So it is a huge deal to the masses to say, hey, The Rock is back in WWE and he's live and it's on Netflix right now. And having one of the biggest stars in the world give the rub, if you will, to Cody Rhodes, to an audience that's not just a hardcore wrestling fan. I guess I get it, but it felt weird to me that we wouldn't have the big entrance and the crowd singing along and the whole pyro and all that for Cody on the first show. I thought that was interesting and not the way they would have done it for any other top guy in history, maybe. Now, of course, as you and I are recording, it's Monday, so we'll see what happens tonight. But were you sort of shocked by that they didn't have the big Cody entrance on the program at all?
Now, Conrad, I think you know me well enough, don't you?
Yeah, I'm just wanting you to rant on it too, I guess.
Conrad, here's exactly my immediate. Wait, did I text you when because no, that was I watched it anyway. Didn't watch it live. Conrad, I'll just say this: if it looks like a duck and walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, when it poops, you don't have to taste it to find out if it's a duck. Do you not? Conrad.
No, sir.
In the crowd?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
You liked it as much as I did.
What? Tell me. Okay. Now I want to make sure I'm clear that I'm not being, I'm not being a Cody crybaby here. I'm talking about
how to position a top guy. They would have done that with Lawler.
Wait, did you say top guy or did you say
The top guy.
World champion.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he's the top guy. He's the biggest merch mover last year. He was, I don't know. It just.
Do you think under any circumstance they would have had Roman Reigns in the crowd waving?
Not a chance.
That
Would they have done that for The Rock? Why didn't he just sit next to the Netflix executives in the front row and wave?
To me, the litmus test is that, and that's
Dwayne's going to do what Dwayne wants to do. I don't care what the org chart says. He's at the top. You disagree?
Oh, I guess my simple question is, does Ari call him Dwayne or Mr. Johnson?
Does he tell Ari what to do, or does Ari tell him what to do?
Oh, shut the front door.
I'm just asking a question.
Have you ever heard a manager tell the client the
client?
Yeah, not the client. What does JR call him? 10%er?
Oh, the blue chipper?
No, he calls him, he's a 10%er, an agent.
Oh, I got you.
You know, he calls them 10%ers. He's a good old 10%er. I don't know. I don't think the 10%er ever tells the 90%er nothing.
Nope. Yes, sir. May I have another? I'll tell you what, though, we're going to be talking something here right now that I know you're excited about. Playoffs. We're already talking about playoffs. You bet we are. Get in on all the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Scoring touchdowns is key to winning in the playoffs, and you can score big by betting on them at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score 6. Go right now to the DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Jeff and I have had an absolute blast with this, and we want you to do it. This past weekend, we were talking all about the Ravens and the Steelers. And, of course, later tonight, as we're recording, we're going to find out what's going on with the Vikings and with the Rams. But it's really easy to take advantage of what's happening right now at DraftKings because you're looking at individual player stats. Like next week, you'll be able to decide, or this coming weekend, rather, man, it's slipping up on us. Hey, what's Lamar Jackson going to do? Is he going to have more or less than 2 touchdowns? It's that simple. DraftKings Sportsbook is the place to go right now. New customers can get $5, can bet just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's such a good offer. I want to repeat it. New DraftKings customers can bet just $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Just download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use our code MyWorld. That's code MyWorld for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-777 or visit ccp.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. Hey, speaking of the playoffs this past weekend, I ran into a little smack talker running around backstage in AEW Dynamite in Clarksville. He couldn't wait to come and tell me, Alabama lost, Alabama lost, Alabama lost, Alabama lost, and Ohio State's going to win it all.
He hit you with that right out of the gate, didn't he?
As soon as I saw him, hey, Conrad, Alabama lost, Alabama lost, Alabama lost, Alabama lost, Ohio State's going to win it all. And I said, okay, Cody, I appreciate that, but enjoy it while you got it because your playoff hopes and dreams with the Steelers, they come to an end this weekend. And he said, well, there's no chance. And I said, would you like to make a bet, Cody? Here's what the bet will be, Cody. If my Ravens, I'm not really a Ravens fan, but for the purposes of that day, I was. Shout out to Jimmy's Famous Seafood and Jeff Jones. The Ravens are going to just dog walk the Steelers. And when they do, your little narrow tail is going to have to walk around backstage Huntsville all day in one of Jeff Jones' Ravens jerseys. But if the Steelers win, I'll walk around backstage in Huntsville with a Steelers jersey looking like a busted can of biscuits. And to my surprise, or actually the surprise of no one, the Ravens dominated. And now I can't even get, I haven't even heard from Cody. I'm just looking for a wellness check here, Jeff. Is Cody okay? Because he's ignored all my messages. He's ignored my DMs, my phone calls, my text messages. Can I get a smoke signal? Is Cody okay?
First, back to our DraftKings. Lamar, Derrick Henry, Patrick Mahomes, take the over on everything. They are going to roll through these playoffs. I can't wait to see that in the AFC Championship. But Conrad, can I tell you about Coaster?
Please do.
I don't know if you're going to like this news.
Uh-oh.
That game was the 7 o'clock game.
Yes, sir. It's a late game.
Less than 12 hours after the final of that game. Ooh,
yep.
Yeah, maybe less than like 8 hours. We had projectile vomiting going on in the house.
Oh, no.
Conrad, I kid you not, he's in bed as we speak.
Wow.
I'm a big believer that, we've talked about this, the three-legged stool of health. You got to have physical, and you got to have, your physical body. Then you got to have, we'll call it the chemical part, which is what you eat, the fuel you put in, then the emotion side. If any one of those, you can't stand up a three-legged stool, you knock one leg out, doesn't stand up, it falls. Buddy, he took that loss, taking this loss really hard. He had it in his mind. And Conrad, I don't know if you watched the game, but there was a drive where they ran the ball 13 consecutive plays and scored. That ripped his heart out. And I said, Codes, it's going to be a long night, pal, but let's hang around. And Karen's, stay positive, stay positive, stay positive. And I looked over at her and I said, honey, when you can run the ball 13 times and score, it can be a really hard night. So my man Coaster is in bed as we speak. We were recording this on a Monday, so the Saturday night loft was tough. We're going to have to pick him up by his bootstraps, but he'll see you in Huntsville, and I'm sure he'll be recovered well enough, and we'll make him feel good about wearing a King Henry jersey. But Conrad, I'm not kidding you. He went in his room after the loss, and that's pretty much last we heard of him till Sunday morning when he was sick.
You think Mike Tomlin finally changes? I mean, what happens here? I mean, I know he won a Super Bowl, but it was 1 year removed from somebody else's team. And
look, and I'm a Titans guy, so I have a point of reference, and I have told a few people this. It can get worse. Trust me. Tomlin is not the issue. I mean, you want to hear all this. Who are you going to go out on the market that's better? And if you actually believe that the entire roster, I'm not going to rain all on Russell Wilson or Justin Fields or defensive or offensive line or whatever it may be, because I think the Steelers got some great players. But I don't think across the board, 53-man roster, Saturday night was the exact result of what should have happened. The better team won. I don't think it's a Tomlin issue. And I certainly hope they don't make a change because, my gosh. I mean, Conrad, I know you don't follow the Titans, but do you know what they did last week?
What'd they do?
So the Tennessee Titans, and I'm a super positive, especially on my hometown team. But anyway, 2 years ago, we hired a general manager. That general manager hired a guy, and that guy became the assistant general manager. A year goes by, and that assistant general manager got promoted over the general manager. Okay, so there's kind of a flipping of org chart on who reports to who. Last week, we fired the general manager. Okay, so now that coach that was brought in by the GM and team, so now we kind of have a lame duck general manager because, look, he was brought in by the guy that just got fired, and now that coach has been in here. To say that the Titans front office is the best would be the understatement of the year. So you Jets fans, Giants fans, Patriots, well, they've kind of at least cured their problem. Steelers and a bunch of other organizations. If you think you've got problems, look up Tennessee Titans over the last 2 years. That's problems.
It'll be interesting to see what happens. But in the meantime, we're going to talk a little wrestling today.
Let's do it.
I can't wait to talk about our topic today because this comes from a time when I was a pretty big TNA fan. Final Resolution 2005 My favorite TNA period of fandom, I guess,
Ooh,
was
okay.
probably 04, 05, as crazy as that sounds. And I don't even really know why. I think it's just where I was in my appetite for wrestling.
Did you
But I'm
watch
looking
sports?
what's that? Oh, yeah, of course.
I didn't know if you. Yeah, so that
Yeah, I
air.
was doing the Wednesday stuff. I was at the debut show. I drove to Nashville a bunch and saw the Wednesday shows. I bought the weekly pay-per-views. I was excited when you were on Friday afternoons on Fox Sports Net. Your
Okay.
first big pay-per-view in Orlando, I was there. I think it was Bound for Glory. I think Tito was there.
No
So,
way.
yeah. So I was all in 04, 05. So this is in my wheelhouse. And I know that there were much more profitable years in the future for TNA, but I also know that there was a lot of political chess moves during some of that time. And I just wanted to know if I can pinpoint 04, 05 as like my peak
Mhm.
TNA fandom. When did you enjoy it the most? When were you having the most fun? I'm not asking when did you make the most money, but I'm saying when you think about happier times, maybe they were bootstrapping times, because a lot of times when entrepreneurs look back, they remember, when we're first getting started and we don't have a bunch of resources, but we got a bunch of belief. And that sort of galvanizes in their mind, like, oh, these were the best of times. When was that for you in your TNA experience?
Oh, good question, Conrad. Because, um, I mean, just right off the top of my head, the we'll call them the asylum years, the first couple of years. Those were some of the craziest. I mean, because my relationship with the Carters was brand new and had gone through the complete upside down health south set of circumstances. Just that 2002 2003 was, pardon the pun, nonstop roller coaster from a professional level. It really was. But when we and I don't want to give shit, this is going to be a long-winded answer, but I'll do my best. But when Bob Carter had asked us, or we got the feeling, and we brought me and my father a potential another financial backer willing to replace them, and Bob Carter didn't just say no, he just kind of said hell no, and wouldn't just kind of treated them unprofessional, if you will. But we got that. Knew Knowing that and going to Orlando, there was a very cool sense of optimism. So I'm with you on the 04, 05 that we were building this, but man, it was still a struggle. And that turning Fox Sports into a 1 hour, if you will, 1 hour from Fox Sports to a 1 hour Spike deal. And we had that summer of a lot of moving parts, weren't exactly clear of the direction. And then Spike came along. That was stressful. But you said fun. When we got on 1 hour on Thursday nights and felt the momentum, and my relationship with Kevin Kay and Spike had really begun, I'll say even blossom, and the understanding and the optimism. And I knew that, okay, they've had Raw. They understand that we're not the WWE. We're not going to do those numbers, but they were genuinely very impressed. So much so that they said, hey, we're going to take you off Saturday nights and put you on Thursday nights, even putting us in late prime or right out of prime on Thursdays. That was a big ass win, Conrad, a monster win, and knew we were on the path. So I'll say from the time we got to Thursday nights, late night, then 1 hour on Thursday, 2 hour on Thursdays, Conrad, that was an absolute blast. The underbelly of all that, Conrad, and we've touched on it, we need to go back into it. My professional career could not have been going better during that time. Video game, talent, Kurt on board, 3D on board. I mean, we could go on through the list. The roster really was taking shape. At home, we got the news that ultimately ended up in the passing of my first wife, Jill. So it was such a, it's hard for me to say, man, I was having a blast at work, but it was successful. But at the exact same time, Conrad, I was, going through the most difficult period in my life from a personal point of view up to that date.
Let's talk about 2005. But before we do, we're going to finish with what's happening at the tail end of 2004. This is from the Observer that was dated December 20th, 2004. Dave would write, Dixie Carter finally gave a talk to the company that all the rumors of closing up. She denied that things were bad, but didn't address any specific points that have been brought up, other than claiming they were in it for the long haul and the financial situation isn't looking bad. She said a toy deal was imminent, the TV sponsorship money would be coming in, and that the TV time slot would be upgraded. I was told she did a good job, and it was something that needed to be said, but the morale coming out of this week wasn't strong regarding the future, particularly since they have 2 weeks of TV in the can and no idea what the main event for the next pay-per-view would be while filming, and therefore nothing was done to even build towards a main event. She told the wrestlers that if they work 2 shows on a taping, they'll get paid for 2 shows. If they work 1 show, they'll get paid for 1 show. If they're brought to a taping and not used, they'll get paid for 1 show. Chris Sabin and Abyss, of those mentioned last week, were actually at the December 7th taping, but the others listed were not. Sabin was scheduled for a TV match against Christopher Daniels, but due to a back injury, Mikey Batts was put in. And boy, did Batts look like he didn't belong out there. Oof. Hard on Meltzer here, but listen, this seems like this was a constant topic where Dixie was having to reassure the troops. You know, she's having to probably fight battles on 2 fronts, unhappy talent and unhappy parents or corporate, whatever you want to call it. When Dixie's trying to put on a brave face like this, do you feel like it's your job to try to lend support and show a united front to the rest of the cast and crew?
We did at this stage, no doubt. I was, again, never a big fan of big group team meetings. I think more issues that can come out of that negatively, because even if you come away with a positive vibe, you're going to have, look, wrestlers, talent, and I'm one of them. We're going to do what we do. We're going to either find something to poke holes in. Oh yeah, it's a rah-rah speech. Same, you know, that addressing the pay. And I've said this so many times, that was a real issue when you're dealt the amount of capital. And I'm very grateful to this day that Bob Carter, stepped up. But when you're dealt a certain amount of capital and you can't really make talent, this is 0405, a complete full-time living, but you're asking for their priority. It's such a balancing act. And that balancing act, yes, our tapings were in the middle of the week. So on the one hand, I'm like, guys, if you can go find work on Tuesday and Wednesday or Monday and Tuesday, go. If you don't want to be a part of this, go. Dixie was a little bit more softer and wanted more of a rah-rah set of circumstances. So there was a give and take there. But it was a difficult set of circumstances, back to, square one. When I said, when you really can't make a guy a full living, pay him a full-time salary, it makes things difficult. Along with those set of circumstances, when you kind of look, and then this is something that my world and the podcast and me and you and our discussions and other discussions, and fans come up to me and they want to talk about the podcast and kind of the history of things. Hindsight's 2020. It's so much easier and clear to see all things, but we're talking 0405 right there. WCW didn't go out of business till 01. This was really the first time. So we had the territories where you could go find work, 22 territories, 6-7 companies in Japan, 2 or 3 in Mexico. There's work all over the world as far as professional wrestling. Then the big 2 came along, and it radically changed how the business was done. But from a talent pool, it really shrunk it down. We're kind of dealing on the back end of this, that it wasn't that long ago that there were 2 companies that could provide a full-time living. One of those went away, so it's just WWE. So the people in the business as a professional wrestling making a full-time living, there weren't that many of us. There just weren't. And the ones that really wanted that slot, hell, you did everything you possibly could to get in there and get that slot. That's where we were just in a unique time, good and bad, in our development.
We should also mention that this is the era where Sabu needs a bit of a fundraiser. So Scott D'Amore books a building that holds 600 seats or so in Detroit on December 12th. And the wrestlers are told that, hey, all the proceeds are going to go to Sabu. So you're not going to get paid. We're trying to raise money for Sabu and some of his medical issues that he has. And TNA even says, hey, we'll help cover the travel since the guys are donating all of their time and they're working for free. The wrestlers that are there, big names like Shane Douglas, Raven, even Mick Foley's there. They're all doing meet and greets and photos at the gimmick table at intermission. They donate all of that money to Sabu as well. But a few of the guys have to hold back a little cash to cover their transportation costs because even though they were told TNA would cover it, they didn't. Do you think Dallas at times was hokey pokey with guys and reimbursements and this sort of thing?
I cannot imagine, other than a Bob Ryder chirp, that TNA said they would pay for that travel. I just, during this era, I don't see certainly Bob or Janice Carter approving it. I don't see Dixie anywhere coming close to approving that. I certainly don't recall that at all, that we would approve of it. Give them the day off, maybe support in other ways. I don't see that, Conrad. And I certainly don't recall it, but I just don't see that happening. I think that was a Meltzer, Keller, whoever narrative.
One of the other things that Dixie touched on in this meeting is saying, hey, we're going to be looking at going to monthly pay-per-views instead of weekly pay-per-views. And it's written in the torch that the office felt like they only needed to draw 17,000 buys on the first pay-per-view in order to be profitable. And if you could get around 50,000 buys, then it would assure profitability across the board with the current budget. Do those numbers sound right? Hey, if we get to 17, we've covered our costs, but if we can find a way to get to 50, this company's in the black.
So I don't remember exact specifics, but reading the research on this, the one thing that I tried to recall is, when did we hire Dean Broadhead? Dean Broadhead became our CFO, and Dean was at Sony Music at the highest of level. Tommy Mottola and Mariah Carey and a bunch of big time Sony players. And that's the world that he came from. He, best of my knowledge, got a big golden parachute, but he came back to Nashville and didn't particularly care for the retired life. And so we went on a headhunter search, and I say we, TNA as a company, we were looking at this time because Panda did all the financing, all the books, all the accounting out in Dallas. And they were a huge proponent of it for so many reasons, because Dallas didn't have their head around certain expenses that should or shouldn't be paid or this or that. So we wanted a finance guy in Nashville. And that's why I'm trying to figure out. But I know the reason I say that is that Dean was very good about running 4 or 5 different analysts. But it made a ton of sense that run one pay-per-view a month, obviously go up in price because the weeklies were $9, go up in price, run the math, run the analysis. And if you bring talent in and production crew, so one talent pay, one production pay, just all that, as opposed to 3 or 4, whatever the month may, or I mean 4 or 5, whatever the month may be, it became real clear that that was the strategy that we needed to do. And I'm backing way up. That's how we, immediately decided, hey, let's go monthly pay-per-views, and the company can be much more profitable. And from a creative point of view, even though it was Fox Sports, it's so much easier to write TV that way. And it was, again, hindsight's 2020, just the natural evolution of the brand.
Well, the natural evolution of all of us come January, as we make that New Year's resolution list. Well, you ready to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel and feel great no matter what life throws at you. Factor arrives fresh and fully prepared. It's perfect for any active, busy lifestyle. You can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with Factor Keto meals based on a randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto. Of course, results will vary based on your diet and exercise, but with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored for your goals. Choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. Factor can help you feel your best all day long with wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go snacks, and more. Reach your goals this year with ingredients that you can trust and convenience that you just can't beat. Jeff and I have tried a variety of meal delivery services. Factor is the only one that we've kept the entire time. Once Jeff Jarrett signed up, he never looked back, and he wants you to eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/myworld50off and use the code myworld50off. You'll get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code myworld50off at factormeals.com/myworld50off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
Connie, give me a little quick Factor testimonial right here. There's a lot of reasons to buy Factor, but since I kind of wasn't feeling very well last week, I almost lived off Factor. I had my overnight oats in the morning, I had my energy bites, and then when you don't feel like cooking, and nobody did around here, pop a meal in there. So it works when you're on the go, and it also works when you're not feeling well. Keep fed, and yeah, it was a lifesaver on Friday and Saturday, just to be quite honest.
Check it out. I think you'll be glad you did. Jeff loves Factor, and you will too. Hey, let's talk about Randy Savage. It's written in the Observer that, well, everyone that Dave talked to shares the same viewpoint he did. With a talent like this, before you do anything, you need to lay out the entire plan and get it all on paper and get it signed. Of course, we know at this point he's come in after a lot of him and hawing. He picks up a win over you, and now we're thinking about how do we get the return match. I guess you and Dusty Rhodes and Jerry Jarrett, you all took turns talking with Randy Savage on December 7th to lay out the scenario of Randy losing at the pay-per-view, and Randy just turned him down, and that was it. And this all happened like 20 minutes before the taping started, and that really threw a monkey wrench into the entire plan here because Savage was booked all over the show. And one of the funniest lines came from Bobby Heenan when someone noted to him that the Poffos don't trust the Jarretts. He said, allegedly, the Jarretts don't even trust the Jarretts. What a great line. It made me laugh. What do you remember of trying to get Randy to come back in and finish what we started and him saying, that doesn't work for me, brother?
Well, Heenan is classic with one-liners, and I can remember me and the professor kibitzing about it, laughing about it. Man, I miss Bobby sometimes. His delivery, but that's a whole nother podcast that maybe we should do of the different cameos of folks in TNA. But I'm glad to say Bobby was a part of TNA a couple of times. But Savage, and one thing that I wanted to hit on right up top on this episode is that when we talk about this era, a lot of people assume that, okay, Jeff is not only wrestling, but he's also doing creative or head of creative. This is the Dusty Rhodes era that we're in. So myself, my father, and Dusty were all involved, but I don't remember any of us assuming that anything was ever a done deal with Randy. Our hope and our wish list, but I'm pretty certain we always had a plan B and plan C because Randy, and I'm not talking about just the TNA days. Best case scenario, he was always just super paranoid and never really committed to anything. I'm not talking about his WWF days by any stretch, but I'm going to say even in his latter WCW days, I'm sure Shivani and Bischoff may have some funny stories about that. But Randy was Randy at this point, and I'll say this, putting my wisdom cap on. When you come to the table with a talent, and I'm not saying doesn't need your money, but can honestly look you in the face and say, I don't need this business. I've saved my money. You're not going to get me into the main event of WrestleMania. I'm not doing it for the fame. I'm not doing it for the fortune. I'm doing it because I want to be here. And when you're dealing with a guy like Randy, you know that going in, period.
Let's also talk about Kid Cash. He's making headlines again. He's going to do an interview where he says that he's turned down a developmental offer with WWE multiple times because after all he's done in wrestling, he doesn't think he should be signing developmental deals at this point in his career. And he also points out that he neither hates nor respects AJ Styles because AJ has developed an attitude and he's made a fuss about other wrestlers stealing his moves when in fact he claims he and Billy Kidman created all those moves. And he also says, matter of fact, Kid Cash, I'm the top heel in TNA because fans will pay to boo me, but they only boo Jeff Jarrett because they're sick of seeing him. And by the way, old Double J, he didn't do any long-term selling in that pay-per-view ladder match he had with Jeff Hardy. I just got to ask, Jeff, it feels like every week we're talking about something else that Kid Cash said that was out of pocket, either about TNA or about you personally. How does this dude keep a job?
You know what? When I read the research, for whatever reason, the old Dutchman I don't say a quote, but his mindset on this. Hell, Jeff, you know all the wrestlers in the dressing room are knocking you. At least Cash has enough balls to make it public. Let's go do something with him. Cash was Cash. He came to work. He busted his ass. He didn't mind being vocal about what he believed and what he didn't believe. I'll say the world we live in today, social media, I'll just say it, a very thin-skinned society. Cash, boy, it'd been very tough for him.
Well, that's what I was getting at. I mean, I appreciate that you guys kept him going. He was one of my guilty pleasures. I love watching that dude work. I think he's great, and I like this approach. But I do think, man, there's no chance he'd do that in WWE. And I like that that means there is an opportunity to do it here. I mean, that makes it feel even more underground, more renegade, more believable. Like, I buy into that and I like it. But it feels like, you know, we've created almost an environment where everybody's got to kind of toe the line. And if they don't, maybe their career will suffer, because I can't help but wonder if Kid Cash was just a little more political, maybe if you had a little less Cash and a little more Jarrett in him. I mean, what was the limit for that guy? He could have done it all if he'd have played the game a little bit, right?
He knew, however you want to say it, how to connect with the audience emotionally.
Yes.
And, I mean, that unfortunately, that's few and far between. And as you can look, man, I'm saying this kind of set of circumstances again, that as time went on, you know, we started on Wednesday night, the Wild Wild West, and got a little bit more sophisticated going to Orlando and Fox Sports. And then we got Spike 1 hour and then 2 hour. And then they kind of started leaning in on, hey, if we're going to attract sponsors. So we kind of grew up and dressed up and a little bit more attention to detail on maybe political bandwidth as time went on. And that to me was either a good trait or a bad trait of mine. You know, I would have conversations, yes, with my father, yes, with Dallas, with Dixie, with people in the office, that you just kind of, it was such I'm going to go back to, man, I'm beating that word to death today too. The juggling act of just keeping the fans engaged. Did we do everything right? No, but we kept growing. There's no doubt about that. We absolutely kept growing each year up through 2010.
Let's talk a little bit about Hector Garza. There's a lot of discussion here in the Observer about Hector. I keep wondering why, if TNA wants to push Hector Garza so much, why don't they put together a music video showing him as a superstar in Mexico? Because he always comes across as such a big deal in the Arena Mexico shows. Dusty Rhodes has decreed that Hector is going to be his Latin star, which is why he pinned AJ Styles on TV. The match was okay, but not a great breakthrough performance. The weakness was the finish. On the December 17th show, when he faced Jarrett in a non-title match, I can't even comprehend the booking. Either way, he's been critical of the booking, but he's talking about how we're really pushing Hector Garza here. He is a Dusty Rhodes favorite, and he's even trying something new where we've got Moody Jack joining Mike today in order to do commentary, and he's doing commentary in Spanish. And that's something that I guess Dusty had seen down in Florida. He wanted to bring it here. It sounds like it would be a crazy idea, but I remember actually liking it. What do you remember about Dusty falling in love with Hector Garza here?
Well, he wasn't the only one. Dixie, and look, I loved Hector just as a talent. There was an initiative that actually started, I don't want to say day one, but year one for sure, from the pay-per-view companies that were heavily, when we would have different calls and meetings about marketing and, in those days, the spots, and then when we went monthly, then you have a spot that's due 3 months in advance, and then you can do round 2 and round 3, all this. But just about every time we heard conversations from those folks, it was, hey, how are we servicing the Hispanic audience? They are they index way above what they should on buying pay-per-views. So we were always sensitive, on the lookout, trying to figure out how to monetize that simply. I mean, the X Division, not that it was the only reason, but a strong reason is, hey, this is partly our version of Lucha Libre, and it's got a mix of this and that and all this. But Hector was a guy that when he showed interest and said or indicated to us that, hey, man, I can do both. I can work in Mexico and come up, that we kind of, in our world, went pedal to the metal with him. And Dusty, no doubt, because Hector could work. He could work his ass off.
We've got a note in the Observer about Elix Skipper. He was interviewed after his legendary cage walk, and he reminded us in that interview that he was sweating and bleeding and had just taken a power bomb off the cage when he did this walk. He even says when he first started the walk, he slipped, but he was in tears after the match because of the long and just overwhelming ovation from the crowd. And he even said that move had been years in the making, that he wanted to do it 17 months ago for the very first America's Most Wanted Triple X cage match, but he was talked out of it back then. We covered this episode not too terribly long ago. I still think it is the #1 most memorable moment in TNA history. Do you remember him wanting to do it before he actually did it, or is this the first you're hearing of that?
Do you know that's the first time I've read that in the research, and that he did an interview. I don't recall any. I'm sure there was a few, but I don't remember any place where I could say, yeah, Elix was quoted here or there. It kind of put a smile on my face that not only did he want to do it this night, but hell, it's a 17-month kind of journey for him to do it. And then to those 4 guys, or 5 guys, just when I kind of look at tag team wrestling from day one in TNA through 2010, and kind of look at not just the progression, but the highlight matches. We're going to talk about one later in this pay-per-view that I vividly remember different folks coming up to me, and I was a little bit perplexed, like, didn't you see this in the Asylum a few different times? But no, Elix doing the move and wanting to do it. And those guys, man, God bless James Storm and Chris Harris. They were such the glue of the tag division coming up. They were the ultimate baby faces who knew how to tell a story, wanted to be the baby faces, kind of put the heels in position to be true heels and fought from underneath. Man, the people during this time frame, they absolutely loved AMW.
Around this same time, we're going to start getting a replay. So Fox Sports Net is not just going to show the Impact program on Fridays. They're also going to start doing a weekly Saturday night at midnight replay. When you find out that you're getting a replay, that's got to be a vote of confidence, right?
And this is something that it's funny, it's touched on at this time frame. And I'll say within the first month, when the overnights would come in, and maybe the first call that we got from FS1, Fox Sports, now called FS1, that they were happy with the ratings, they said right then, hey, man, we're going to kind of search around and figure out if we can't get a national replay involved in this. It was contractual in there. They could have run it 30 times if they wanted. And look, there were certain markets that were never reported about, that certain regional networks, if they had an hour open, they could choose to run it, and they did. We wanted that thing run out there, and I know there was a time when we only wanted to have one replay, and I don't remember all the ins and outs, but yes, when we got the Saturday night replay, we knew that, okay, just more audience.
The company also announces licensing deals with Liquid Blue, who's going to distribute their t-shirts, and Toy Biz to release action figures in the coming March. These are big deals, and I'm not saying they made the company a ton of money, but just to get any sort of footing with a licensing partner has to feel like high fives all around, right?
And again, I'll go back on the time frame. WCW had, well, I mean, there was only two, WWF and WCW, but their licensing program was widespread. Overnight, all those vendors went out of business and went away. Liquid Blue was a t-shirt company that, hey man, we're going to take more than a flyer. Let's give this brand an opportunity, because it had the underground feel and gritty. And so it was an indicator. You're right. Wasn't going to make us a ton of money, but if there is one licensee on board, it's a lot easier to get 2, 3, and 4. And then as far as Panda and Dallas went, they knew, okay, that's one. Let's get 7 or 8 in the pipeline. Another baby step, but it was certainly a positive step. Toy Biz, that's a whole nother discussion. That was getting in the toy business game, which, in the licensing world, the two big ones that will always dominate are video games and action figures.
Let's talk a little bit about Scott D'Amore. The Torch is writing that he's got a little bit of heat with some of the talent because they feel like he's double dipping. He's getting agent pay and manager pay. The idea being is he's paid to help work on the show and help agent matches, but he's also appearing on camera as a manager. And there's speculation that he makes as little as $400 for those shots and as much as $750 for those shots. So sometimes he could make $800 a show, and other times he could make $1,500 a show. And if you're thinking to yourself, what are we talking about? I wonder the same thing. But I guess this is enough to piss off some lower talent who are upset about how their pay has been cut or been positioned. But my goodness, in hip hop, they call this pocket watching, and this is a little silly. Jeff, what say you?
Oh, Conrad. And these were the little frustration points that I would, and look, I mean, and not just Scott, others, but I'm like, guys, okay, when we're going to use 400, that sounds kind of close for the agent pay, or I don't know whatever it may be. But I'm like, guys, do you think he just shows up and does his work day of, and that's all he does? There's 6 other days in the week that he is helping out, whether it's talking to a talent or talking to me or talking to somebody else in creative. That's kind of let's look at that as a salary, because it's 7 days a week. Scott doesn't charge, and others. I could use different examples. Jeremy Borash, multitude of others. Hey man, they don't say, hey, I'm not getting paid for this. This is not our work day, so I can't get paid. And it was nitpicking. And again, I chuckle at the amount of bandwidth, positive and negatively, that Meltzer and Keller and others spent on the most minute set of detail, just silliness. But this was the headline for the day, if you will.
I'm excited for us to talk about where the pay-per-view biz is. But before we do, there's a report in the Observer that I guess Hector Garza had a confrontation with the Outsiders, and he's going to clean house on both Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. But there's a report to Dave that Kevin Nash is getting, razzed by the fans there in Orlando. And I guess Nash got in one of their faces about Hector Garza beating him up and said something like, "Don't you guys know this shit is fake, dumbass?" And I don't know why, but I howled with laughter at the idea that these guys think they're getting over Kevin, and then Kevin can't wait to say, it's all fucking fake, right? Like the idea that he even cares. Like the Kevin Nash is one of a kind, my man.
But again, the silliness that this makes a newsletter,
it's unbelievable.
It's silly, but also in the heat of the moment, the people that were giving Kevin a hard time, and he throws that in their face. I've been there and seen it. Those are the guys that say, "Oh no, I saw him for real kick you in the mouth. I saw that, Kevin. Don't you lie to me and say this is all phony."
So funny.
It's the best.
I love wrestling.
Don't we though?
It's believed that Turning Point, according to the Observer, the Turning Point pay-per-view did between 25,000 and 30,000 buys. And Mike Weber, who's over at Triller as a consultant these days, I think he's low-key retiring. He was helping run marketing for TNA a few years after this. And he would say during his tenure that the numbers that Meltzer would report based on pay-per-view buy rates were fairly accurate. And he would get numbers before even TNA did. How do you think Dave Meltzer was getting those pay-per-view numbers, Jeff?
Relationships, truly relationships. And he started those relationships, in the mid 80s?
Yep.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you look at the transition of the Vince McMahon leap from closed circuit to pay-per-view and the pioneering of, gosh, Conrad, all the different, I mean, it's a fascinating kind of, when you look at a map of the United States and know that WWF buys are going to come from the coast, Northeast and West Coast. And in the heyday, WCW buys, majority are coming from the South and the Midwest. And when you kind of know that history and you develop relationships, I'll say with the top 10 markets in each of the 4 geographical regions of the United States, and you have, in those days, a speed dial, not a cell phone, but you have that kind of relationship, and the buys that come in for an event on a Sunday, and the guy shows up to work on a Monday and say, "Hey, for my area in Topeka, Kansas, we did this many buys." If you know the industry and can do some simple accounting, you just extrapolate it out, and then kind of there's your number that you can go off of. But Dave, relationships that TNA, he's Dave, like I said, Dave started in the mid 80s. Best case, we started in 2002.
There's a note in the Observer that WWE is interested in talking to Bill Behrens about being a part of the Atlanta Developmental Territory Project. Of course, we know eventually this is going to be known as Deep South, but once upon a time, maybe that was going to be Bill Behrens. We know it didn't shake out that way, but there in Cornelia, Georgia, he was doing Wildside TV. We saw guys like Abyss and AJ Styles and Slim J and Caprice Coleman and a bunch of great talent come through there. But behind the scenes, Bill Barron has been like a low-key agent for a lot of talent, still is to this day. And I'm curious, what was his official role, if any, with TNA in, say, early 05?
I'd have to really look at the timelines, because off and on, Bill was affiliated. He was never an employee. No, he was never an employee. So everything was a 1099 set of circumstances. And he helped Syndicate Explosion. And that was early days. Like you said, AJ Styles' agent from day one. He's been with AJ from day one, and others. And so he's always had that agent / an agent to some, an advisor to others. Loved the industry and ran his promotion. So he had relationships with everyone. And I say everyone: TNA, WWE, independents across the country, Booker, independent promotions in the United Kingdom, all over. That's Bill. He's always been one of those connectors, if you will. Doesn't mind staying on the phone at times, maybe not so much now, but back in the day, he would grind it out. And when they started this developmental set of circumstances, I remember, wasn't Jody Hamilton pretty actively involved before others wasn't Jody the original
Deep South guy? Yeah.
He was the original guy, right?
Yep.
Before Dale DeMott and before anybody. Yeah. Okay.
Even now, Nick Patrick runs Deep South. His son, Jody Hamilton's son, still runs Deep South.
Well, I'll be damned. Did not know that. Okay.
Something else we didn't know, Jeff Hardy did indeed show up to the December 21st tapings, but it was only about a half hour before the taping began. And management, according to the Torch, was finally pushed to the point they decided to send Hardy home rather than use him. By comparison, Scott Hall's at the show 6 hours ahead of time. Kevin Nash was there 4 hours ahead of time. Is this where you guys finally drew the line with Mr. Hardy, or what do you remember about this?
Can you believe that somebody at TNA had the ability to report, all right, Hall's here. Let's mark that down. He's here 6 hours in advance of the show. Then we got a 4 hour. Oh, Hardy showed up 45 minutes. It's just mind numbing. Don't recall specifics. Either we had him written in and wrote him out, and we just said, hey, Jeff, we've already rewrote the show. Go on back to the room. That's what my gut tells me we did. But, we've gone into detail. My personal relationship with Jeff maybe wasn't the best thing for either one of us, because showed him a lot of leniency in so many ways. But that was the reality. He's a unique talent, the charismatic enigma, could do things other talents could never dream of, namely the monetization of the brand of Jeff Hardy was a phenomenon.
I want to hit a few rapid fire ones here, but before I do, I want to remind you that in the new year, man, it's time to try some new things. I'm talking about Veya 2025, man. New you, new year, full of new possibilities. Easy for me to say. Don't let the bad times of 2024 bring you down. This year, reach new heights with Veya. Trust by 500,000 happy customers, Veya is like the Swiss Army knife of wellness, dedicated to harnessing the natural benefits of hemp to create high-quality wellness products, whether you're looking to help your sleep or improve your focus or recovery, maybe just add a little pep in your step, or maybe you just want to feel a little elevated. Veya has something for you. They've got products that range from 0 to 100 milligrams of THC. So Veya gives you the power to blaze your own trail. They're world-renowned for their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes. They've even got THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops, all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part is, Veya legally ships to nearly all states in the U.S., all in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee. Did I mention there's no medical card required? So if you're 21 or over, we want you to check out the link to Veya's website in our description today, and be sure to use the code MyWorld. You'll get 15% off. And if you're new to Veya, you even get a free gift of your choice. I've been a big believer in Veya. I've had a lot of help with their sleeping products. And what's great is, man, if you're a novice to this whole thing, just any sort of hemp product, and they make it easy. They label everything. This is for relations. This is for focus. This is for sleep. This is to chill out. This is to give you energy. I've learned a lot. And I've also learned that Veya is the industry leader with over 500,000 customers served. I like using Veya because I know it's made right here in the USA. It's farmed and then crafted with care here in the United States. I also want to brag on their award-winning customer service. I think it's just top notch. And they've also got quality ingredients. You're actually going to see where it's been lab tested and then certified. But maybe most importantly, this time of year, it's premium products that fit your budget. It's affordable, it's accessible, and they make it easy. You see, Veya is the only lifestyle hemp brand. It's all organic and vegan hemp extracts. They're perfect for relaxation and rejuvenation. So whether you're looking to get better sleep or ease your anxiety or enhance your mood, or maybe you just want to have some of that chocolate cake, as JR would say, this is for you. And by the way, their products range from 0 milligrams all the way up to 100 milligrams of THC. So they got you covered no matter what you're looking for. If you're 21 and over, be sure to check out Veya in our description. Use that code MyWorld. Dude, you'll get 15% off. And if you're new to Veya, a free gift of your choice. And after you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them. This is important. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. And then this year, enhance your everyday with Veya. Hey, man, I want to ask you about Elix Skipper because it's in the Torch here. because he's just pulled off one of the greatest stunts in the history of wrestling. And it's in the torch. I can't believe this is real, that he made $500 for the match. He's under a 2-year contract that pays him $500 per shot. And there's a lot of people talking, saying there's no chance I would have done that stunt for $500. And I know that that is a go-to for a lot of people who consume wrestling on the internet, and they see a hardcore match and then they say, oh, he did this hardcore and now he's going to get, a hot dog and a handshake or whatever the meme of the week is. But man, you saw a lot of people, yourself included, do some hardcore matches in the Memphis days back in the day. But you've always been rather pragmatic and a businessman about, hey, if you want me to do this, I got to get paid that. But once upon a time, it wasn't that way. I wanted to ask you, what do you make of this report? Did Elix get more cheese on his Whopper for the cage walk? Was it way too little for way too much of a risk? And do you think back about your career and think there were similar times where you probably did some things that in hindsight, maybe you weren't paid enough? Maybe that wasn't the right move at the time.
Boy, situational and context is the things that kind of jumps off the page. I think we would have heard about it, or maybe we wouldn't have in this time. That if Terry Taylor was around during this time frame, I feel certain that he would have said, hey, let's bonus these guys. Maybe DeMoore said, hey, let's bonus these guys. So I'm going to say, I'm not going to shut the door on that they didn't get bonused on that. Again, this is a time frame where we were not profitable. So the $500 a match, that was we were already investing in a brand, trying to make it go. That's kind of my Elix Skipper answer to part of that question. To kind of back out on that, I always have looked at, whether it's myself or others, the ROI, high risk, high reward as a part of my promo. And when I really look at different things, was there a time in my career that I didn't get maybe paid like I should have? In the Moondog series, I didn't know no better, but I took more headshots than I probably should have. Lawler too. Lawler at that stage of his career, damn sure didn't need to do it. But kind of the good or great was lifting the entire territory, which it did. So I think being a businessman, you're never going to make all the right decisions by any stretch. But I think taking the risk on the big stages is the smart thing to do. I think it's when guys take a risk with almost zero chance of getting a return on that. We're talking about Jeff Hardy on this. When I kind of look at Jeff Hardy's highlight career, you look at probably his biggest risk, but on the biggest stages, SummerSlams and Mania and whatever it may be. I've never thought, as far as big high flying moves, that I don't say it didn't fit my persona, but I just was schooled in a mindset that you got to work every week. And so you better be able to tell a story every week, both physically, but learn to tell that story. Talk to me about Lawler and many, many others. As time has gone on, you can look at different talent across the board that are just incredible athletes and can do things that, candidly, I mean, there's several out there across the board in all of professional wrestling, not just in Japan, the United States, over in Europe, that is what, in their mind, the industry has evolved to, is breathtaking moves. And I do think, don't get me wrong, they are such a part of today's business, and nothing is going backwards. It's not like in basketball, we're going to just take the 3-point arc down, maybe widen it out, and nothing goes in reverse. And I don't propose it deal. And back in my day, that's a bunch of crap. But I do believe the fundamentals of this industry of connecting emotionally, and that comes with different things. That's how I've always looked at my career. From a business point of view, is connecting emotionally. And Elix chose that night. And rightly so. Again, he'd been holding it for 17 months, and a big blow-off pay-per-view, and the people gave him a 5-minute standing ovation. I kind of think that that risk was worth the reward that he personally received. To this day, I bet he remembers the feeling he felt after that match.
It was something else, man. Monty Brown is out doing media, and Wade Keller would interpret it in the torch as saying, "Oh, he's trying to get down his WWE speak." And there's a lot of talk about that sort of thing because in the Observer the following week it says the new snag is Abyss's contract has expired, and now WWE has expressed interest in him. Like with Chris Harris and James Storms, when their contract are coming due, a lot of guys in the locker room have told them he should go. He has potential there as a big guy who can move and work, but Abyss was not used at the January 4th tapings. Now, this is something that's been talked about a lot. I think a lot of people believed that Abyss would make the jump and probably have some sort of a feud or work a program with The Undertaker. I even recently saw someone say, hey, considering the role he has behind the scenes with WWE now, producing some of the biggest matches in WWE, he made the right call staying in TNA because he got to wear that jack of all trades hat and learned every aspect of the business. Maybe he wouldn't have been afforded that opportunity had he gone to WWE. What do you remember about his contract ending here in 04? And as we start 05, you don't have him on paper. Were you concerned that you were going to lose the big man here?
Super concerned. And it goes on during this time. That's why maybe Terry Taylor wasn't here. Bob Ryder was, again, a man who wore a lot of hats. But Bob always had an issue on, he tried to serve two masters. The easiest thing was be good to the boys, but in the, be an office member. You can't serve both masters ultimately. Bob was very aware of everyone's contract situations and he let it lapse. And I remember going 2 + 2 here equals 4. It's pretty simple that, because his contract lacks with us actually not even really having the ability to sit down and negotiate. So I was very concerned, irritated as hell at Bob Ryder, but wasn't exactly sure how it was going to play out. And you have to remember that, Abyss was a guy that, yeah, he was on our first show, but he went to Puerto Rico. And when we came and got on board, he was figured in at the highest level from the day he returned from Puerto Rico. And man, when I tell you, it's hard for me to imagine in a lot of ways the success we had without Abyss, because look, if Abyss would have jumped right now and gone to WWE, there's no doubt he'd still be exactly where he's at today because he's a thinking man. He thinks about it. He processes it. He doesn't mind going back to the well. He doesn't mind taking input. He doesn't mind speaking up and saying, no, what about this? He's a team player. Coachable, teachable, smart, thinks it through, knows the difference between a big man match and a little guy match and different blends and X division and tag matches and main event matches versus everything you need in a producer / agent / coach, if you will. But during this time, I was frustrated that we were going to lose a guy that we had put so much stock in. I don't remember all the ins and outs. The thing that I remember the most was Bob, I don't believe, was particularly being honest with the hand that was feeding him. And it wasn't the first time.
I wanted to ask you about, because you said even if he would have jumped, he would still be right where he is right now. If he would have jumped, do you think he would have made a bigger name for himself in wrestling? I mean, obviously, but having the WWE machine behind him, I'm just thinking about long term, because a lot of wrestlers, and we both know many guys who make a full-time living just on the autograph and appearance circuit. Like that's their only gig and they sort of live a quiet, retired life. Maybe they have a few investments here or there, but the only motivation they have to leave the house is to just go pick up a little autograph appearance here or there. And those talents, by and large, were talents that were a part of the big primetime marketing machine of WWE. Do you think the real life Abyss would have made more money and perhaps had a bigger legacy amongst mainstream wrestling fans had he made the jump back then? Clearly it all worked out and he's doing great stuff right now. But you said he would have wound up in the same spot, so I can't help but ask, did he make a mistake not going?
And I probably told him something to this effect, that the way I saw, and me and Abyss we've laughed a shitload together. We've cried together. He's been with me in some dark moments. I can't say enough. We give him a hard time, but I really can't say enough good things about the guy. And I probably said it maybe not as blunt. Maybe I would have, but I would have said something to the effect, Abby, you're going to go have a run with Undertaker, and you're probably going to have a run with Kane. And if all goes according well, which I have no reason to believe, that you won't do fantastic business with both guys, then you're going to get a run with Cena, and then it's going to be over, because they're not replacing Taker, Kane. Cena is irreplaceable in his mark. They've got monsters there, and so I think you're going to have a rocket attached to you. I have no idea where you'll land after that, and so that's the gamble you're taking. The next 2 years are going to be a smashing success. I don't know where it goes from there. And I probably said better than that. And I probably would say that to this day, that it would be, what type of relationship could he have developed with Vince McMahon during this time frame? I think it would have come down specifically to that.
He usually did. It's hard to say that it was the wrong decision to stay. I mean, it all worked out the way it was supposed to.
And look, by the grace, I'm so glad that he did, because just kind of look at the building blocks. And I'm saying on both sides, but on TNA side, it was a monster win. You just
a huge win for you guys, for sure. To keep a talent like that, I know people recognized it at the time, but with the benefit of hindsight, Abyss has got to be on the Mount Rushmore TNA. It's not even close. Yeah.
Homegrown, and look at the amount of main events.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he could work with literally anybody. Raven, AJ Styles, anybody in between.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk a little bit about the wrestling channel. It was over in the UK, and supposedly it's losing quite a bit of money on a weekly basis. And the TNA deal that you guys had, so you could have your program aired on the wrestling channel in the UK, is going to come to an end. We haven't spent a lot of time talking about that. I wanted to ask about your experience dealing with, I think his name is Sean Herbert, and if you can tell us whether or not you remember them being behind and paying TNA.
I don't remember all the payment, because just about, especially in the early days, everybody was behind. It's how the international cash flow worked. The bigger the company, the tighter the timeline. It was just the nature of it. A little fun fact, and online, if you're listening to this out there, a friend listening to this, especially in the pond, how many people were introduced to TNA through the wrestling channel? Our man Grado certainly was. There's others, but it was, and Will Ospreay tells a story the first time he saw, but I think by this time we were on Challenge TV, but when he saw AJ Styles for the first time, Will's like, that's what I want to do. That's what I can do. That's what I can be not just good at, but great at. And just kind of those little aha moments that, look, as the little engine that TNA was during these years, us getting on the wrestling channel and just beginning to build that brand is something that, there's a lot of what ifs that we have talked about on here. But, our first couple of tours of UK, we knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that TNA could be a very special brand in the United Kingdom. And it all started with the wrestling channel.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about Bill Behrens. There's follow-up reports here that he's going to be the guy who's going to be running television for the Atlanta Developmental for WWE. It'll be he and Jody Hamilton running the shooting match, but they'll be the point people, but it'll really be up to him to book the TV, just as he has with Wildside. Just do that for us here in WWE. It's written in the newsletters that he's got another week or so in order to make his decision. And Meltzer even says that this would be an about face for Bill Behrens because he usually prefers to work with smaller, more athletic performers. So you've got a lot of 170-pound high flyers, Dave says. And WWE, of course, wants more of an 80s style, bigger guy. And the Torch would even report that him just having this offer from WWE has led to some heat with the TNA office because I guess Bill Behrens has let it be known that if he takes the job with WWE, he'd be making more money. And of course, that is why everybody does this. So when he's saying, hey, I'd be getting a raise there, maybe that rubs some people in management the wrong way. Wade would even speculate that it feels like they're just being petty and maybe they should just be happy that Bill had an opportunity. Did you remember Bill riding the fence or any sort of whisper of, hey, I'm getting a raise, hint, hint, give me more or match it and I'll stay?
Can't say that I don't remember any of that, but I know that we were in no position to pay because what was his role was essentially a syndicator. And what would he do in Orlando that he was going to do for WWE? We already had producers and agents and the machine and the cog. And so it was really a decision of, Bill, when you know your decision, let us know. And I think kind of the whirlwind that we've talked about here, especially during the TNA, it's fascinating to look on how much backdraft, maybe that's the right term, that the Sheets, the Meltzers and the Kellers and others created for TNA positively and negatively. A lot of times, a lot more negatively, because the Behrens issue, we were never going to get in a bidding war under any circumstances, because if he was going to go to WWE, he'd do his job. It was what it was.
It was what it was with some other talent too. You know, we mentioned that the perception is that Monty Brown has WWE interest, and so does America's Most Wanted. The Torch would say that Kid Cash is on his best behavior backstage, but, quote, he could explode any day now, said the wrestler while laughing. Apparently, Cash is still upset with the way the company is using him, and he's not fond of the push that America's Most Wanted continues to receive. And there's even another report in the Torch that says most of the locker room expects AMW to receive the NWA tag titles at the next pay-per-view. And one of the more popular theories is, hey, management's going to try to placate them with the tag titles in an effort to get them to resign. And here's a line that I think is just, man, I got to ask about.
Oh, boy.
Wrestlers also laugh at Chris Harris and James Storms behind their backs for the way they act in public places. Quote, there's nothing more pathetic than seeing somebody who isn't anybody trying to act like somebody, one observer cracked. Man, I want to ask you about that, but there's another report about Monty Brown that feels sort of the same thing. Wade writes this. Some of the top wrestlers are making it known they don't want to work with Monty Brown because they feel like TNA is turning him into Goldberg. Quote, no one wants to work 3 minutes and take the pounce, one wrestler said. There's even some wrestlers who sense that the push is going to Brown's head. They say he's still respectful to the other wrestlers, but that he's offered some hints that he thinks squash wins are appropriate. Man, I just love that we got people even complaining about who wins and loses. It's one thing when we're complaining about our pay. I can almost get with that, Jeff. But when Kid Cash, not a tag team wrestler, has a problem with AMW getting a push, and then other guys are like, oh, they're acting like they're big stars and they're not. Who gives a shit? What is any of this? I mean, this seems, I can only imagine from your mentality, this is just childish knitting circle bullshit, is it not?
It's so in circus stuff. It's truly, I mean, just come on. But oh boy, another saying that I don't want to say we just use it in creative because of, but no, it was somewhat company wide, is that consider the source. Well, we don't know who said that. Okay, my point. Like, if you don't know who's saying they have a problem with Chris and James, that let's either start there or stop there. If you don't even know who's saying it, then we let's go to the source. Who's saying this? And if you got a problem with this or problem with that, and it's just, boy, that kind of stuff in my morning stoic reading that I had today, Conrad, that was so clear about just the clarity of that goes a long way, man. It goes such a long way. The simplicity of don't worry about anything other than what you actually can control. Like that nonsense, Connie, Jesus, just silly.
Well, something that's not silly is we've talked a lot today about how you guys are fond of Hector Garza, and he's going to be getting the push of a lifetime, and he's Dusty Rhodes' favorite. Already, there's some rumbling about Dusty Rhodes' booking. Nobody's clamoring for you to take the book over yet, according to Wade, but they don't really like Dusty doing it. Quote, you can't have a 55-year-old who knows Texas and the South writing a national product. They need younger writers. Well, one of the apples of Dusty's eye here is Hector Garza, and he finds himself arrested on January 3rd at the Houston airport for drugs. They found 2 types of steroids and some other pills, none of which he had any sort of prescription for. It's not uncommon that wrestlers might be caught with steroids or growth hormone, but when you've got an immigration issue, you got to wonder, oh, is this going to have some other effects? Of course, this winds up coming out to be a misdemeanor, so it's not a huge deal. He's going to post $1,000 bond to be released from jail. But obviously, when you've got, I mean, I feel like TNA's drug testing policy at this point is probably don't ask, don't tell, because drug testing is very, very expensive. And respectfully, I don't know that steroids should have ever been banned in wrestling. I know we'll take a little bit of heat for that, but whatever. What did you, I mean, this has to be a panic moment because you don't want the negative press when you're trying to negotiate television contracts and licensing deals. Anytime one of your stars gets arrested, you know, you're going to have concern. How do you remember hearing this? And were you pretty panicked about it? Or did you recognize that's not that big a deal?
I don't remember actually how I heard this news, but Conrad, let me ask you a question here. Mr. Silva, maybe go back to a 2-shot here because I'm curious. What do you, when I would hear this type of stuff, what do you think the first thing I did or the first call I did?
Conan?
Nope.
Pena?
Nope. The first thing I would do would
Call Dallas?
Call Dallas.
Yeah.
Because there's a lens, and some people call it the bubble, but there's a wrestling lens, and then there's a investor lens, and then there's a legal lens, and just all of that. And I can remember just like, all right, explain this to me, what you do and don't know. And I called, and the attorney out in Dallas said, why don't you give me a day? Let me dig into all this because you're going to hear all kinds of stuff. And then the report was, okay, the drug situation, it is what it is. It's not best. There's going to be some bad PR, blah, 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 blah. But the immigration set of circumstances, he's got a CMLL work visa. This may be game, set, match. They don't play with it. It is so far out of hands. We can get immigration attorneys to go to work on it. It's going to be very costly. But Jeff, and then I'm like, my most important thing here was, okay, what does the investor look at? And they're like, hey man, this is going to probably, let's see how it plays out, going to be dollars and cents because it's going to cost money for the immigration attorneys, if at all possible, to kind of smooth out. And that was, man, from I don't say a personal, but from a creative point of view or a wrestler point of view, or looking at the roster in totality, it was kind of a ball shot for all of us. We all really liked Hector, had a lot of belief in him. He had a great disposition about him. He could work anywhere on the card, heel or babyface. So that's where it was like, damn, dude. We all hated it for him and just weren't real sure how this was going to play out.
I got to say, just as a reminder, nothing that Hector Garza was arrested with and he had in his bag, it was all stuff he could get over the counter in Mexico. It wasn't even prescription stuff in Mexico. He could just go to the pharmacy and buy it. And listen, this isn't popular, and I know everybody wants to pretend like this isn't the way of the world, but there's a lot of guys when they hit 35 or 40, they start taking testosterone. Some of your favorite wrestling announcers, and I'm talking about Jim Ross. He takes it. He's talked about it on his podcast. So it's not an uncommon thing. Hector's 35. I know he maybe was in front of the curve before this was. I mean, now there's so many men's clinics in mine in your area, Jeff, where you can just go get this. Maybe that wasn't the case back then, but I just don't. This feels like much ado about nothing for me. I mean, it ain't like he's smuggling freaking heroin in. He
No,
had personal use steroids. That just doesn't seem like a big deal.
but I mean, again, am I accurate in saying the drug issue was a fumble, but the immigration part of it, because
Makes it tougher. Yes.
he got flagged, or however that all works specifically, it was. I'll say this: if American would have got caught with this, it wouldn't have been walking scot free. But I believe this was a second flag for him, which in immigration circumstances is no bueno.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing I wanted to ask about. Do you think the issue is because I realize that a lot of, I mean, I can't believe this isn't just common knowledge, but a lot of wrestlers, international wrestlers, come into America to wrestle, and sometimes they don't always use the proper paperwork, Jeff. I don't know if you've heard that.
There's rumor and innuendo as something to wrestle used to talk about.
Yeah.
I have no.
But it's a very costly and long drawn out, tedious opportunity to do it the right way. So I guess my concern here is when you're saying he got flagged, do you feel like TNA hadn't sponsored the work visa? Maybe he had one from a promotion in Mexico. Is everybody sort of pointing the finger on this? Do you think that you got your hand slapped because you weren't doing it the right way here?
No, Hector. Look, CML, you can't say employee, but his work permit, the best I recall was it was going to get us over the hump, but not long term. And we better start working on long-term solutions. But I don't think we were there at this point. That he was legal, but we got to figure out a long-term solution. We just weren't there yet.
It's written here, while details were not confirmed, it's believed the biggest problem is an immigration issue and not the misdemeanor steroid possession charge, although it is the latter situation that resulted in him spending at least 10 days in Harris County Jail near Houston. It's believed that he did not have the proper working papers, although those in TNA were of the belief that Armando Quintero, who was in charge of that, had taken care of that some time back. Garza had been flagged coming across the border for TNA before, and it was an issue months back with TNA regularly bringing in Team Mexico for the X Division Cup shows because all of the Mexican wrestlers were coming in on tourist visas. TNA and Booker Dusty Rhodes had just started a major push for Garza as a Latin sensation babyface like 70s promoters, and the push was going to include scoring a pinfall victory over Scott Hall at the Final Resolution pay-per-view. Man, this is talk about bad timing here. This is just not good at all for Mr. Garza.
No. Can you do on your Google machine? This is 05. Hector's matches in the United States from this point forward. I don't think he returned.
Really?
What year did he pass away?
His last match was in 12.
Okay.
So yeah, he you're right. His last match was December 21st, 2004. My gosh, that was his last.
And I'm not maybe K-Dog or others. I remember it being a lot bigger than people understood. 2 flags. Again, Conrad, I'm not an immigration agent. This was, I don't want to call it the death penalty. It was a bad deal. It was a really bad deal for him personally, as far as, because it was going to take all those kind of attorney fees. You know, he had a flag, more than a flag on him. But yeah, so that was his last. Yeah, and you kind of glossed over it. The dude spent 10 days in
10 days.
Ridiculous.
I'll be honest, I didn't realize that was the end. Like,
I thought so. And when I was doing the research, I was thinking, man, I wonder if this was, but I kept going on with it. But I was like, I remember that was it for him.
what a career. I mean, if he's not arrested here, you got to think as SmackDown started to lean into, being more aimed toward, hey, we're looking for our next Hispanic star, whether that's Eddie Guerrero or Rey Mysterio or Alberto Del Rio. Like, they tried to make SmackDown sort of that show for a long time. And if he would have used TNA as like a coming out party, he shared an in-ring promo with Roddy Piper. He cleared house on Scott Hall and Kevin Nash. He beat AJ Styles, and he was about to pin Scott Hall at a pay-per-view. The sky was the limit for him in America, right?
I'm telling you, when you kind of look at just what you laid out and then some, we'll call it the WCW influx of the luchadors, Psychosis, Hoovy, Halloween, Damien. I mean, there's those guys all super, super, super fantastic. A lot of them under the mask. There's only one Rey Mysterio, game, set, match. He's truly, silly ass MJF throws around generational talent. He's a buffoon for saying it. Rey is truly a generational talent, but he's a mascot. When you look at Garza as that handsome, good looking, and like I said, he knew how to work heel or babyface. The sky truly was the limit for the dude. I mean, there's no telling what he could have done had he had his big break.
You and I have talked about before, what if, the biggest what ifs in TNA history, and we both sort of landed on Monty Brown. Hector Garza might be up there with him too.
Oh, he's top 5. There's no doubt. It's funny, we've touched on a bit. What if he would have jumped?
Yeah. I do want to talk about that, but before I do, I want to remind you that it's not like the immigration department had a hard on for Hector Garza. Although if they wanted one, I know how we could get their ding dong so hard, Jeff, even a cat couldn't scratch it. I'm talking about Blue Chew. Jeff is enjoying the best sex of his life thanks to Blue Chew. Yep, it's all smiles. I saw Miss Karen last week, and boy, she had a swagger when she walked. She was grinning extra wide. It's good days to be Double J and the Last Outlaw, and it's all because he knows that Blue Chew is the original brand offering chewable tablets. These erection-enhancing tablets help men achieve stronger, harder, and longer-lasting erections for sexual activities. Silva, we'll go to a 2-shot now. Jeff, let me ask you a question. You reckon you're going to chomp down a Blue Chew before you actually get in the ring with MJF? Oh, you don't want to do that. Okay, I see. Well, Blue Chew's putting its money where its mouth is. They're offering you a month free, and their process is simple. You'll sign up at bluechew.com. You'll consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. Somebody let MJF know that Jeff is going to be working stiff in their affair. Blue Chew's tablets are made in the USA, prepared and shipped directly to your door, and you can take them anytime, day or night. So, dude, just plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The best part, it's all done online. That means no visits to the doctor's office, no awkward conversation, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. And let me give you a spoiler. This isn't just for guys who are in a relationship. If you're in the dating market, you need to leave a lasting impression. You want them to ask for a return match, maybe go 2 out of 3 falls, maybe even get no holds barred if you're lucky. Here's what I'm talking about, though. You don't want to be a one-hit wonder like MJF. You're looking for that return business. The return matches will make life easier by getting harder, and discover your options at bluechew.com. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. You can actually try Blue Chew for the first month free. Just visit bluechew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring today's podcast. So, Jeff, we've talked a little bit about Abyss. And I wanted to follow up on that because you said, hey, what if he had made the jump? Well, here's what's written in the Observer. Abyss, parentheses, Chris Park, is officially done with bad feelings on both sides for how it ended up playing out. It went down on January 4th in Orlando like this. Bob Ryder, who handles the contracts for the company, had forgotten to inform Abyss of his contract expiring and that the company was exercising its option to roll him over for another year in time to keep from time running out. The contract itself expires on January 30th, and it appears the company had to give written notice 6 or 8 weeks in advance to have it roll over. Ryder has a lot of heat on him for this oversight, particularly since he and Abyss are friends. And Abyss often stayed at Ryder's home when he was in Nashville. Although the two are not roommates, as was reported in some circles, the company was well aware Johnny Ace had found out and expressed interest in negotiating when Abyss was free and clear. Abyss came to TV and gave notice, which he had to do if he wanted to leave, saying he was willing to job on the way out. I've heard different versions of what happened next, but Jarrett negotiated. Jarrett asked Abyss how much he wanted to stay, and Abyss asked for a raise, believed to be to $1,000 a show from the $500 he had been earning on his last contract. Jarrett presented the number to Dixie Carter, and she approved it. When Jerry went to Abyss, he said he couldn't sign right then and needed a few days. Jarrett felt since he gave a figure and they agreed to it that he should sign. They presumed he didn't sign because he was waiting for Laurinaitis to make him an offer. Jerry told him if he didn't sign the deal then and there, the deal was off the table. Abyss is the type of person who's naive when it comes to business matters at this level and also very concerned with what people think about him. He recognized TNA and Mantell gave him his first U.S. break and made him a star to a degree and wanted to show loyalty. Other wrestlers he spoke with about his situation felt he was too concerned at this stage about showing loyalty, and at this point in his career, if WWE wanted him, he needed to take the offer. Abyss ended up mad that they would hardball him with the offer taken off the deal, and he didn't sign it right at that moment. He complained because he felt Ryder dropped everything to make sure Harris and Storm, when WWE wanted them, got a raise and a promise of getting them the tag belts. But Ryder didn't even meet with him. In the end, Abyss wouldn't sign. Jeff told him if he didn't get a job or make it in WWE, that TNA wouldn't take him back, which left Abyss furious when he was telling the story to various wrestlers at the show. When Jarrett told Dusty Rhodes about all this, they made the call that Abyss was done at that point, even though he'd agreed to job out. This all took place literally as the taping was starting. The show started about 20 minutes late, and Abyss was in, I believe, the first segment, which was actually changed as the show was being taped. Rhodes made the call to put Abyss on both shows and the pay-per-view, or pull him from both shows and the pay-per-view, and said that his name shouldn't even be mentioned on the broadcast. He was heavily written into both shows because he's supposed to be building up a TLC match with Jeff Hardy, and that makes 3 tapings in a row where something had to be redone. Savage 2 weeks ago, Jeff Hardy last time, and now Abyss here. So the Hardy versus Abyss match was pulled at the last taping and then put back on when they made the decision to keep Hardy. But now, of course, that's all canceled because Abyss is out of here. And because Park used the Abyss name in Puerto Rico before TNA, WWE could have him do the same Abyss gimmick. Knowing the way WWE usually handles things, I'd guess against that happening. No decision as to who Hardy will face. Man, there's a big breakdown here. It's pretty much even broken down in the torch the exact same way. They're saying that if he would have stayed with TNA, he'd have made around $50,000. Everybody seems to think he'd have made a lot more than that in the WWE. What do you remember about your dad trying to negotiate, Bob Ryder dropping the ball, Abyss being upset with Bob Ryder? And is this accurate? You go to him and say, hey, if they don't take you, you're not welcome back here. Do you take that hard line with him?
I can't see that. That doesn't make sense. It's kind of negotiating on a hypothetical that just doesn't add up. I
can only see you doing that if you were good and pissed off. Like normal Jeff would not do that.
That's what
but if Jeff's got his volume turned all the way up, I could see it.
That's what I'm saying. An irrational thought, like completely irrational. And so, and I already, maybe I got ahead of myself on the story. I was pissed off at Bob Ryder, because I just know how Bob can remember the amount of airline tickets he bought from a show 7 shows back or 4 shows or 7 shows in front. That was a huge reason Bob was in a position that he was, is because he had an eye for detail. Always. I think I said that in this year's when I sent in a comment for his Hall of Fame situation. Bob was at times miraculously pull things out on an eye to detail. That's why I didn't buy his story. Oh, I don't know how this slipped through. BS. But Conrad, you'll like this, or yeah, you'll like this, because as it's one of those things that Karen would say, now you can't remember A, B, and C, but you can remember this minute detail. So my father came to me and said, hey, let's walk over here and let's have a conversation. And he basically said, what's your thoughts? Do you want to keep Abyss? Or not? Yeah, I think, yeah. How strong do you want to go? But the topic was Abyss. And man, I went into extreme detail on how valuable I thought he was. That I don't know if it was a babyface run yet to do. He can work anywhere on the card. He can lay out his match and the others' matches, and you don't have to worry about him being selfish. Just positive after positive after positive after positive. Because I think I saw things in Abyss before he even saw things in him. That's a pretty strong statement, but I do. I really was a big believer in him, and I didn't tell him that at times because we always had fun and all this. But anyway, I went into this very pro Abyss speech on how important I thought he was, not just to the roster but to the company. My dad sat back and had this big grin, and then Conrad, he goes into not only doubling down on my thoughts, but I mean really extrapolating out upon it. And man, oh man, he was happy to hear that me and him were aligned on this, and he couldn't agree more. I mean, it was a rah rah rah, but it was good. But I didn't really think nothing of it at the time when he was doubling down and extrapolating out, and we were aligned on it. Obviously, again, hindsight's, but I think my dad was happy that we were in alignment all this, and that he went and had the talk, and Abyss basically said, I ain't signing. I got to think on this. Well, this is the maybe character trait of my old man that, yes, I've had it from time to time, but was not a positive one, because it really offended him in a big way. And he did, I don't want to say a flop on him, but it rubbed him bad the wrong way, that he thought he could get the job done and he didn't. And we kind of just kind of pushed this down the track for the day, and he didn't sign. And we were, I guess we had to rewrite TV and all that, but glad it all worked out. But boy, oh boy, there was a tense, I don't say just 24 hours, but this set of tapings, and we didn't want to lose him, no doubt about it. And I had felt from the very beginning, I smell a rat between Bob Ryder.
I mean, smell a rat though. That's kind of strong, isn't it?
Not really, because I'm a firm believer that yes, you can, and again, Bob had an apartment that the company paid for. Yeah, probably still paid for by this time. I think they
He thought it was intentional.
No doubt. Get Abyss more money and go to WWE. Yeah. But Bob doesn't let details like that go. It wasn't even brought to our attention that the deal was up. And look, again, if you want to be an agent to wrestlers, do that, but don't take a paycheck and be an employee of the company.
Overall, they're saying that morale is in the torch, that morale is good right now. Wrestlers seem to be overall happy with Dusty Rhodes' management style. But at the same time, Bill Behrens is no longer associated with TNA. That makes the torch. That's the line. And even the Observer says Bill Behrens, who worked backstage at the TV tapings, was told a few days after the tapings he was being let go. This came after Behrens took a meeting in Stamford to discuss helping with WWE's proposed Atlanta developmental system. While Behrens is believed to have not accepted the offer at the meeting, even before the meeting at the tapings, the vibe was he isn't going to be around much longer as he's negotiating with the enemy. Man, I know that, you're trying to cut costs, but is even the idea that someone else is interested, I mean, you guys take that personally and just, okay, we don't need him anymore. We can save some money. Show Bill's ass the door.
I think that's a little bit of a dirt sheet.
Well, why did he leave? Why was he no longer there?
No, I think we had pretty much come to an understanding, Bill. You're going to work with them. And again, he wasn't an employee. So it was he was already AJ's agent and a few others, and he was helping out syndicating. So I think that would have been his only true source of revenue from TNA Entertainment. And it was pretty much a given. He's going to go work for them, say, hey, let's make this easy and go our separate ways.
I know that it's not exactly what's next in our format, but I want to mention that just 1 week after Abyss was done and told, pack your shit, Skippy, you're done, he's back. It all finishes. It all comes to a head on the 11th. Bygones be, big guy.
January, right?
Yes. January 11th
of 05. Yeah. Okay.
He resigns, and they come to terms on January 11th. It was kept a secret from everyone. It's believed he got the raise he asked for, and it makes one question whether WWE really had interest in him, and they should, because they're going after far less talented big guys. That's according to Dave Meltzer. If WWE did, the idea of turning down WWE, which will be in business for the next several years for TNA, is very much a question mark if they'll last to the end of the summer. Well, that doesn't seem to be a smart long-term move. To show what a secret it was, even Scott Hall wasn't told, and he was mad since it had to do with his match. Virtually nobody in the company, and it's believed none of the wrestlers, except for probably Jarrett and Jeff Hardy, were aware that Abyss had signed and would be on the show. Now, surprising people is one thing, but the links that they went to left those with WCW experience very unhappy and feeling they're working for similar bozos. Let's talk about that. How do you come to some sort of resolution with Abyss? Do you step in? Do you just go see him in real life? Do you have a face-to-face conversation and fix it? How does, after things are so hot and boil over on the 4th, how do you guys fix it in less than a week?
I think there was just a multitude of conversations. Myself, I would imagine Dixie. I would imagine my father. And at some point, Bob Ryder, because of his position in the company, I think he had to have stepped in because he was in the middle of talent contract negotiations, I believe, during this era. And so it was time to, all right, what are we going to do here? And I don't know what his concrete offer, if you will, was from WWE at this time. Again, 05, such a different, for fun's sakes, what is the main event of WWE 05, January 05 pay-per-view? What does that card look like? What was their programming look like? Was it Undertaker, American Badass? Where was Kane? Where was Cena? What big man did they have on the card? I don't know. What did that world look like during this time? But, and I don't just say cooler heads prevailed, but I think there was time for us to get out of Orlando, to let some of the pressure, let that valve open up and decompress and say, okay, what do we want here? All sides. Yeah, I mean, that's what happened to the best of my recollection. But man, yeah, going through this podcast and reading the research, it was pretty hot and heavy there for a second.
We should mention that that's not the end of the Abyss news. During the afternoon before the show starts, Dusty Rhodes gets up and gives what's described as a very good motivational speech to the entire locker room. He gave some sort of an analogy of cows in a herd eating grass that was supposed to convey that, well, the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And the thing that really hurt him with some people was he went out of his way to say how we lost a great piece of talent in Abyss. Everyone's assuming Abyss is gone. And then it comes out that they were just lying. He's coming back on the very same day that Dusty's saying this. Quote, wrestling is a paranoid business to begin with. Talent has a natural distrust of management and paranoia about things, even at times when it isn't warranted. To go right out and prove to talent that you aren't trustworthy proves no purpose when management's job is often to get people to do things that aren't in their own best interests because it's in the best interest of the company. Rhodes talked about how the other guys, never saying WWE, were doing really bad. Rhodes told the wrestlers he was always open to advice because he'd gotten a rep very quickly as a guy who didn't want to listen to inside output or outside input. I get it right. Really put over a lot of the younger wrestlers, described by one person as damage control, because he got mad at guys for being mad at what Scott Hall and Kevin Nash and DDP were earning when they were the guys who drew the Victory Road buy rate, making others feel like they'd been slighted. He said the company has a good mix of young and hungry wrestlers like AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels and good veterans that they could go to for advice. Do you remember Dusty giving this speech about how the grass isn't always greener and we lost a great piece of talent? And then Abyss comes back the same afternoon. Like, man, even I'm just curious about that, because if Dusty was intentionally working the boys, that's not a good look. And I agree with what's written here. I think what's more likely is Dusty didn't even know yet. So he's trying to rah-rah the troops. But when he comes back on the same day, he being Abyss, boy, it really cuts the knees out from under Dusty, doesn't it? I mean, how can we have any credibility or trust in what he's saying if that happened? It feels like
The one,
what happened, Jeff?
yeah, the 101, don't work the boys. And you know, with the old whole adage is when you try to do shoots, brother, we're telling stories here. And look, we're all guilty of it if some shape, form, or fashion you be attached to creative, but it's just doesn't work out. But going back to Dusty was running the show here. It was his creative. I certainly don't remember this rah-rah speech. I don't remember certainly the speech, but even to the links that from a storyline perspective, that Abyss was away for any length of time. So, that's something that through the years and look, gosh, it's a Jarrett lesson. It's a Jerry Lawler or Jerry Lawler, or just having different conversations with guys to really be away and to the return. You've got to do so much more than a guy just showing back up. You got to plow the field. You got to plant the seed. You got to water it. You got to get it ready so you can bear the fruit, if you will, when said wrestler returns. I don't even think Abyss missed a month of programming. I may be off by a week or two. So I don't even, in my mind, Conrad, remember a quote unquote return. I don't know. I just don't.
Well, we're going to pack it in for now. We've still got a lot more to talk about from January of 2005. We're not even getting to the actual pay-per-view, but I'm sure we will. Or you know what? We're not too terribly late. You got a few minutes, or do we need to cut it off?
I got a call in 19 minutes.
So that's going to be it this week, boys and girls. We will be back to talk about maybe one of the crazier stories that happened during the year. Bill Watts is involved, and suicide is a topic. So I don't necessarily want to rush through this.
Okay.
We are going to talk about the matches. We're going to talk about a lot more. But man, what an interesting time this is, where we're trying to grow a company. We're trying to hang on to talent. We're trying to make the budget work. We're trying to get our talent out of jail. I mean, so many moving parts here. I can't wait for us to pick up the story. We'll do that next week. If you guys have questions about what you heard this week, about Abyss, about Kid Cash, about anything in between, we want to hear from you. Find us on social. Let's keep the conversation going. That's easy to do. It's at Real Jeff Jarrett, wherever you enjoy your social media. Or, of course, your home for all things Double J is myworldpod.com. If you haven't already, go hit the subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell. You don't want to miss the next time Jeff and I are live. But we've got a lot to talk about next week here on the program. And we are going to talk about you going one-on-one with Monty Brown for the NWA World title. Ooh. We're going to talk about Dusty Rhodes being a booker. We're even going to talk about a photo that you took that maybe with the benefit of hindsight, you wished you wouldn't have. Yes, we're talking about that. All that and more next week, right here on the program on My World.
Peace.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson here to tell you a little more about what adfreeshows.com is all about. Get early, ad-free access to more than a dozen of your favorite wrestling podcasts every single week, starting at just $9. That's less than 20 cents an episode each month. And yes, you can listen to them all directly through Apple Podcasts or your regular podcast apps. How easy is that? Ad-free shows also has thousands of hours worth of bonus content and docuseries like Title Chase, Eric Fires Back, Conversations with Conrad, and The Insiders. Plus new series like The Book with David Crockett, Monday Mailbags with Mike Chioda and Nick Patrick, and a whole lot more. And you want to talk about early? You can't get any earlier than listening to the shows live. You can be a part of the live studio audience as we record the podcast. Plus, ride shotgun alongside your favorite childhood heroes for live watch-alongs, Q&As, and other interactive experiences every single month. Come on now, see for yourself what thousands of other wrestling fans from around the world have discovered, that adfreeshows.com is the best value in wrestling. Check it out today, and hey, when you do, the first week is completely free. adfreeshows.com.